No chimneys, no furnaces, no heating at all. Northern England, the year 1400. It is January, and the frost is on the inside of the walls. A family of 7 lies in a single room, and they are not alone. An ox and 2 cows breathe in the dark beside them, because those animals are the closest thing this family has to a radiator. No chimney, no furnace, just one open fire on the earthen floor, and it must never be allowed to die. This is how you survive a winter with no heating. Not with technology, but with fire, animals, and bodies pressed close against a cold that could kill you by morning. For us, winter is a thermostat. For medieval people, it was a war fought every single day, and losing it meant frostbite, hunger, or death by morning. Inside a peasant cottage, the temperature on a January night set only a few degrees above freezing. Water froze by the bed, breath hung in the air, and yet, across 400 years of brutal northern winters, ordinary families survived with none of the things we think we cannot live without. How did they do it? The answer is a stack of clever, desperate, half-forgotten strategies. Fire, livestock, wool, and salt. And every one of them shows how close to the edge these people really lived. This is how medieval people beat the cold. The fire in a medieval house was never allowed to go out. Not once. Relighting it from scratch, striking flint against steel over dry tinder in a freezing, damp cottage, could take the better part of an hour. So every night, the last person awake performed a ritual called the curfew, from the French couvre-feu, meaning to cover the fire. They raked the glowing embers into a heap and buried them under ash, so a single seed of heat could survive until dawn. That one hearth, a simple ring of stones in the middle of the floor, was the entire heating system. There was no chimney. Chimneys were a luxury that did not reach ordinary homes until the 1500s and later. So the smoke just rose, filled the upper half of the room, and leaked out through a hole in the thatch or a gap beneath the eaves. People lived permanently in a haze. Their lungs, their walls, and the roof above them turned black with soot. But that smoke did a hidden job. It kept the thatch dry and drove insects out of the roof. You breathed poison in order to stay warm. And warmth, in that room, came from more than the fire alone. A single cow gives off about as much heat as a small electric heater, roughly 1,000 watts, and medieval families knew it. Across northern England, Wales, and much of Europe, the most common rural home was the longhouse, or byre house. One long building under one roof, with the family living at one end and their animals stabled at the other, often with no wall between them at all. In the depth of winter, the oxen, cows, and sometimes pigs were not just livestock. They were central heating that ate hay and gave back warmth, day and night. The body heat of 2 or 3 large animals could lift the temperature of that shared space by several degrees, and several degrees was the difference between miserable and deadly. There was a price. The smell was overpowering. The floor at the animal end ran with dung and urine, and disease passed easily between beast and human. But no one with cattle left them out in a killing frost, and no one in a cold cottage refused the heat they gave. Warmth was warmth. Even fast asleep, the animals were working, and so, in their own way, were the beds. Whole families slept in a single bed, and often, so did visitors. Privacy, as we understand it, did not exist, and in winter that was a feature, not a hardship, because the fastest way to stay warm was to share body heat under a shared pile of blankets. The wealthier the household, the cleverer the bed. The prize invention was the box bed, a wooden cupboard fully enclosed on every side, with doors or a heavy curtain you pulled shut behind you. Climb in, closed the doors, and you created a tiny sealed room within the room. Your own breath and body heat warmed a space barely bigger than a coffin, cut off from the freezing air outside. Bed curtains around a four-poster did the same job for those who could afford the hangings. Mattresses were stuffed with straw, or for the lucky, with feathers, and over you went wool blankets and animal skins. People even wore caps to bed, because most of the body's heat escapes through the head. The bed was not furniture. It was survival equipment, the single warmest cubic yard in the house. And the grand stone homes of the rich needed those beds even more. Here's the twist. The lord in his stone castle was often colder than the peasant in his mud hut. Stone is a magnificent cold sink. Those thick walls soaked up the winter chill and radiated it straight back into every room. And a castle's cavernous halls were nearly impossible to warm with a single fire. The peasant's low, small, smoky cottage, packed with bodies and animals, trapped heat far better than a great hall with a 20-foot ceiling. The nobility fought back with tools the poor could never afford. They hung the walls with thick woven tapestries, not just for decoration, but as insulation against the radiating stone. They burned charcoal in metal braziers that servants wheeled from room to room. And crucially, in the deep of winter, they did not actually live in the Great Hall at all. They retreated into small private chambers built into the sheer thickness of the walls, rooms just big enough for a fireplace, a bed, and the warmth of a few close bodies. Wall fireplaces with proper flues did reach castles centuries before ordinary homes. But comfort was never guaranteed by wealth alone. And outside those walls, the weather itself was turning against everyone. The River Thames froze so solid that Londoners lit bonfires on it, roasted whole oxen, and held fairs on the ice. These frost fairs were possible because, from roughly the 1300s to the 1800s, the climate itself grew colder, a long stretch historians call the Little Ice Age. Winters that earlier generations had never imagined became normal. Rivers locked in ice for weeks, harvests failing, growing seasons cut brutally short. And when winter turns lethal, it rarely kills with cold alone. It kills through food. Between 1315 and 1317, relentless cold and rain rotted the crops across northern Europe in what became the Great Famine. Grain prices soared, people ate their seed corn and stripped bark from trees, and by some estimates around 10% of the population in the worst-hit regions died. The true killer of a medieval winter was almost never a person freezing beside their hearth. It was the slow triangle of cold, failed harvest, and hunger closing in over months. A hard winter did not merely make you uncomfortable. It could empty an entire village by spring, which is exactly why survival was less about one warm night and far more about a whole year of relentless preparation. Surviving winter began in November with slaughter. Around the Feast of Martimas, on the 11th of November, families killed the animals they could not feed through the cold months and preserved the meat by salting and smoking it. Salt was so precious that it gave us the word salary. That salted larder had to last until spring. Clothing was its own quiet science. There was no cotton in medieval northern Europe. Instead, you layered wool, which insulates even when it is damp, over linen worn next to the skin, and topped it with hoods, cloaks, and mittens. And then there was fuel, the daily obsession. The right to gather firewood or cut peat, known as turbary, from common land was so valuable it was written into law, and families spent hours every single day collecting wood, dried dung, and peat just to keep that one fire alive. Dawn in a frozen house meant breaking the ice on the water bucket, coaxing the banked embers back into flame with your own breath, and stepping onto an earthen floor cold enough to numb your feet. It was relentless, exhausting labor, but it worked. For 400 winters, it kept ordinary people alive against a cold we would find unthinkable today. So the next time your heating clicks on without a thought, picture the family asleep beside their cattle, the fire that could never die, and the frost on the inside of the walls. They survived a cold that would frighten us, with cleverness instead of technology. If this pulled you into their world, subscribe to Curious History. Next time, why medieval people slept in 2 shifts, waking in the strange dark hours in between. New videos every week.